I mentioned in my opening remarks, this panel particularly, I think, is going to be the most informative panel because we have policymakers, individuals that have been involved on this effort from the beginning, from the policy front. When all the discussions that we've had up until now have been about how can we change policy, how can we get policy aligned with the threats to give the law enforcement, intelligence, and military individuals the capabilities and the tools that they need to go after these networks. Well, these are three individuals that have been involved in this. I'm going to introduce the panel, and I should say that our first panelist, Congressman Jeff Duncan, will only be able to stay for his remarks. He has to go back to attend to congressional affairs, so we're going to have him go first. But I want to introduce the whole panel, and then I will turn it over to my colleague Hugo Acha, who will work with Congressman Luis Petri, who will give his presentation in Spanish, but we will do interpretation. First, let me introduce Congressman Jeff Duncan. Congressman Jeff Duncan, I'll read you his formal bio, but let me just say on a personal level, has been working on this since I can remember, when I was involved in doing this effort back in 2012 and 2013. Congressman Duncan at the time sat on the Homeland Security Committee. As I mentioned before, he chaired a subcommittee hearing that dealt with Iran-Hezbollah networks in the Western Hemisphere, invited Prosecutor Alberto Nisman to testify in that hearing. Unfortunately, Nisman was not allowed to come and testify, but we had a productive hearing nonetheless. He carried that work over to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, where he chaired the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee, held subsequent hearings, and actually passed the first piece of legislation, or introduced the first piece of legislation that passed on countering Iran and Hezbollah in the Western Hemisphere. That was signed under the last government, and now has taken this effort onto other committees in Congress, and is also I believe, the new chair or co-chair of the House Argentine Caucus, which is a congressional parliamentary friendship group between the Argentine Congress in the United States that was established, I believe, in 2018, January 2018, and the previous chairs were Congressman Elliot Engel and Congressman Mike McCall. So no stranger to the region, no stranger to Argentina, no stranger to the AMIA and the work that's been done. It's a pleasure that you join us today, Congressman Duncan. We consider you one of the leaders on this effort in the U.S. Congress, and I'm very delighted that you're going to be chairing this new friendship group, and you can count on our support, and we're very much looking forward to your remarks. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jeff Duncan.
Thank you, and I apologize that I will have to leave after my remarks, but I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here, because this is an issue I've started following in 2011, and that is security issues in the region, in the Western Hemisphere, Iran's activity, Hezbollah, the tri-border region, the AMIA bombing, understanding that the largest loss of life from an act of terrorism prior to 9/11 happened in Argentina, Buenos Aires, with the AMIA bombing, and we need to remind folks about that, and we're now at an anniversary of the AMIA bombing, so it's very apropos to talk about where that act of terror was hatched, and that was a tri-border region, and it was propagated by Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is supported by Iran. Iran's the largest state sponsor of terrorism. Iran is very active with cultural centers in the Western Hemisphere. That is ways they can not only recruit and train folks, but they can spread their propaganda about the West throughout the region, and that is not really conducive for the relationships the United States of America has with the countries in the Western Hemisphere. I've spent a lot of time traveling and learning. I'm a sort of an exploratory congressman. I'm very hands-on. I like to go and see. I was in the Bakken in North Dakota just this week looking at horizontal drilling, hydraulic fracturing, and energy issues, but I've spent time in Paraguay and Ciudad del Este and Buenos Aires and other places in the region talking with folks that are affected, talking with government leaders. And one thing I want to do is applaud President Macri and his effort when he was elected to reopen the investigation and what happened with Alberto Nisman. Alberto Nisman was actually the single most, I think, important person in Argentina investigating the AMIA bombing and really looking at potential government involvement and cover-up of the genesis of the AMIA bombing. And unfortunately, he was assassinated. And the last government tried to sweep his assassination under the rug. President Macri said, no, we're going to open that investigation, find out how Alberto Nisman died, and also continue the work that he had started in looking into an act of terror there in the capital city of Argentina. So as co-chair of the Argentina caucus, we're going to look at shared cooperation, economic opportunities, and ways our governments can work together. But I promise you, I will continue looking at what's going on in the region to try to help Argentina prevent another act of terror on its soil, whether it targets Israeli or Jewish interests there, or whether those targets may be Argentine or U.S. interests. So it's important to do that. It's important also for me and other congressmen to travel to Ciudad del Este and understand the tri-border region. Understand that folks from Lebanon, way back in the late 70s, began traveling to that region, and Hezbollah got a foothold there. And when you ride around that region, you see that a lot of the economic activity that's going on, Hezbollah is skimming money to fund their terrorist efforts around the globe. And that is just one center that we know that folks have traveled to, exchange their documents in order to get false papers, false passports, in order to transit the rest of this hemisphere and try to get to the United States of America. And we know that we have a porous southern border here, and that folks, if they can transit to Mexico on Fox documentation, they can enter the United States if they're willing to cross miles of desert like we see happening every day. That's a concern. If you ever ask me of what keeps you up at night, then it's our porous southern border and the fact that terrorists could come across our border and that we have no idea who is in the United States of America. Let me repeat that. We have no idea who's in the United States of America. We know that Iran, Quds Force, the Iran Revolutionary Guard Quds Force, tried to enter the United States of America along our southern border in order to assassinate the ambassador from Saudi Arabia in this very city. And that was thwarted because of a DEA effort. We got lucky, folks. You don't always get lucky. So if we know that the Iran Quds Force has tried to enter the United States to assassinate the Saudi Arabian ambassador, what else have they entered the United States to do? It's very important that we continue to work together as security elements within the region, and that's not just Argentina, but that is Colombia, that is Brazil, that is Paraguay, that is Uruguay, that is Chile, that is Peru, to make sure that our intelligence services are talking to one another, that we're aware of the potential Iranian activity here, we're aware of the potential Hezbollah activity here, and we can thwart any sort of effort that Iran or other elements may have, whether that's ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Abu Sayyaf, any of the other terrorist organizations that want to do great harm to the Jewish community, to Israel, to the United States, or to Western interests or Western Hemisphere interests. That's important. It's important that we work together. And it's also important that policymakers like I travel to that area. When I traveled to Ciudad del Este back, it's been several years ago now, I talked about earlier about the financial transactions, whether it's rent, whether it's the sale of knockoff goods. Hezbollah is being funded there. We've got to figure out a way to stop that money flow. We also have to try to stop the false documentation, because I could go through a litany of examples, but we know that people on false documents have been apprehended in Brazil. They've been apprehended in Honduras. There's one instance where 5 Syrians traveled to the tri-border region, exchanged their documents. They actually traveled from Syria on fake Israeli passports. They exchanged those passports for Greek passports in the tri-border region and worked their way on up, and were in an airport in Honduras trying to fly to the United States of America. Now, they said they were teachers and farmers. I find that hard to believe that you would pay the money and go to that length to exchange false documents to try to get the United States of America. These are areas where I think the cooperation between Paraguay and between Argentina, between Brazil, between the United States is imperative, that we're able to thwart that sort of thing. I look forward to continuing my work as the co-chair. I'm limited because it's bipartisan caucus. It is not just security focused. I was more effective as chairman of the Western Hemisphere subcommittee. I was more effective as a member of the Homeland Security Committee. I'm now on Energy and Commerce. So it's very difficult for me to focus on these issues from the Energy and Commerce Committee because we just don't deal with those sort of things. So finding opportunities like this to speak to you, finding opportunities to work as co-chair of the Argentine American Caucus is very vital to members like myself that aren't on the appropriate committees to continue our work. And I will say that I'm very close to Carlos and Mark, and Mark Walker's here. I don't see, oh, there he is. And very close to them. Rebecca, that used to work with me, now works at the Department of State, Assistant Undersecretary of Western Hemisphere Affairs. So I still have my fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the region through my relationships. And if something crops up that I should know about, I have no doubt that my friends and allies and colleagues will share that with me. But they also need to hear from you because you might be tuned into different channels that the committee needs to know about, or other advocacy groups, think tanks, policy groups need to know about. And that's important that we maintain the relationships that are in this room in order to further the information flow to policymakers, decision makers like myself and others that can make a difference in a timely manner. And so I thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak. I just want to reiterate that my work in Argentina, my work on security issues in this region, my furtherance on understanding that Russia is a big player in Venezuela, Iran's a big player with cultural centers. They are not friends of ours in this region. There is a reason that they're here, and we need to be aware of that at every moment so that we can react and work with our colleagues within the OAS. We need to challenge the OAS to step up its game and support democracy. That's what it was founded to do, support democracy in this region, and be a little stronger against Venezuela and support for democracy there. Because a free market democracy, democratic institution in Venezuela helps thwart Russia and Iran and China and other elements that we may not think are friendly in this region. So I think that's important. I think that's something that we aren't talking about enough that we should talk about. We see continual efforts in whether it's Bolivia and Ecuador as well to, they're not friendly to American interests. If they're not friendly to American interests, I doubt they're friendly to other democratic interests in the region as well. So thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I look forward to continuing our work as co-chair. If there's opportunities to speak in other forums, please let me know. I apologize I've got to leave, but thank you for being here and thanks for listening, and God bless you. Thanks so much.
This next presentation is a very special presentation, and actually it's so special it's going to be done for two people. Congressman Luis Petri is perhaps the most important political figure when it comes to talking about what took place in Argentina last week. And I refer to the designation of Hezbollah, the historic designation of Hezbollah as a terrorist group. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, Congressman Petri was the only congressman in the National Congress of Argentina that was entrusted upon to work with President Macri and his national security team, particularly his ministers in security, justice, intelligence, and foreign ministry as well, of course, to be able to find the path forward. Because aside from the technical aspects of the registry, there was also political aspects that needed to be overcome, that needed to be well-defined, and that needed to be thought through so that this could become a very solid effort and permanent effort to be able to change the trajectory of Argentina's counterterrorism efforts. Congressman Petri led this path forward and worked directly with the Ministry Ministries and was at the ministerial last week where Secretary Pompeo spoke. His formal bio is that he's a national congressman for the Unión Cívica Radical, the political party in Argentina. He's the second vice president in the Chamber of Deputies of the Argentine National Congress, that's equivalent to our House of Representatives. Congressman Petri has been a provincial legislator for 2 terms. He started his second term as a national deputy in 2017. He is currently on the National Defense and the Homeland Security Committee in Argentina, among many others, in the Congress, and he's worked on several counterterrorism legislative initiatives, including the designation of Hezbollah as a terrorist group. He's a lawyer by trade who received his degree from Universidad Nacional del Litoral in Argentina, and we are very honored to have his presence here with us at the U.S. Senate to be able to talk to us about exactly what took place in Argentina for the first time in a public setting here in the United States. Let me also introduce our research fellow for countering transnational organized crime, Hugo Acha. Hugo Acha is a close colleague, an expert on everything that has to do with the flow of illicit narcotics, money laundering, and the convergence with terrorist organizations. He's been working on these issues for more than a decade. He's originally from Bolivia, so he started examining this when he was a human rights attorney in Bolivia. Obviously, that's become increasingly difficult to do from within Bolivia, had to leave the country and seek asylum here in the United States. Is now, I'm proud to say, a U.S. citizen as of this year, and has been involved in a lot of our research at looking at how these networks converge, not just in Bolivia, but all throughout South America, Latin America, and moving into Africa and Europe, because this truly is a global challenge. So Hugo will help me in this portion of the presentation, because Congressman Petri was much more comfortable presenting in Spanish. His PowerPoint is going to be in English, for those that want to read along, but Hugo will help us in translating his presentation as we go along. And then we'll give you remarks afterwards to sum up essentially the major points of what Congressman Petri is saying, and then add his own reflection towards the end. And then we'll turn to Congressman Petri. So without further ado, please help me in welcoming Congressman Petri and Hugo Acha.
First of all, I apologize, but my English is not good and I prefer to speak to Spanish for you. En primer lugar, quiero agradecer a Joseph y a su centro por esta invitación. También quiero agradecer especialmente la presencia de embajadores y representantes consulares de distintos países y particularmente de la embajada y del embajador de la República Argentina. Agradecer el apoyo de Robert, que ya ha estado varias veces en la República Argentina, acompañando y estimulando a que luchemos contra el terrorismo que azota al mundo.
Well, first and foremost, I want to thank Joseph for this opportunity. I want also thank the Argentinian ambassador for his presence here, also members of the diplomatic corps here in Washington, D.C., and also thank Robert for all his support in this endeavor.
Hay un antes y un después del 2001 en el mundo, con los atentados a las Torres Gemelas. Sin embargo, ese cambio se produjo quizás antes en mi país, en 1992, cuando se perpetraba un atentado a la Embajada de Israel. 2 años después, la República Argentina sufría el peor atentado que recuerde su historia, que le costara la vida a 85 personas y más de 300 heridos.
For the world, there is a before and an after when you consider the attack on the World Trade Center. But for me, as an Argentinian, this story began a lot earlier. In 1992, the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires was the first taste of global terror. That was followed 2 years later by the worst attack in Argentinian history and only second to the aforementioned attack to the World Trade Center. That was the bombing of AMIA in Buenos Aires that caused 85 casualties and more than 300 wounded.
Hace 25 años, cada 18 de julio, las víctimas y todos los ciudadanos de la República Argentina nos reunimos para reclamar justicia, para que se conozca la verdad y para que sean condenados los perpetradores de este horrible atentado.
For 25 years, every July, on the 18th, we, Argentinians, gather to ask justice. Justice for the victims, justice for everybody affected by this heinous act.
La semana pasada, el presidente Macri anunció la creación de un registro de entidades y personas vinculadas al terrorismo y su financiamiento, que marca a las claras una decidida lucha contra el terrorismo internacional que no comenzó la semana pasada, sino que comenzó desde que arrancó su gestión como presidente de la República Argentina y que marca un antes y un después en la lucha contra el terrorismo en la región.
Last week, President Mauricio Macri published a decree, namely the public registry of people or entities linked to acts of terrorism and their financing. This proves the commitment of President Macri in the fight against global terrorism, a commitment that has not begun just last week, a commitment that is long-lasting to fight international terrorism.
Durante muchos años la República Argentina no tuvo una clara política en lo que tiene que ver con la lucha contra el terrorismo internacional. De hecho, en el año 2013, en un hecho que nos avergüenza, la República Argentina firmó un memorándum con Irán en el cual se creaba una comisión denominada de la verdad que se iba a encargar del juzgamiento de los responsables del atentado. La expresidenta de la Nación, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, consideró este pacto con Irán un hecho histórico y nosotros, en ese momento, desde la oposición, lo calificamos como un pacto de impunidad porque no se puede buscar justicia pactando con los perpetradores, pactando con los responsables del atentado a la embajada de la AMIA.
Sadly, before this, Argentina lacked a clear policy regarding terrorism. An event in 2013 brought shame to all of us as Argentinians. A memorandum was signed between the Argentinian Republic and Iran. It was named, and there's no irony in this, as the Truth Commission. This agreement between the administration of Cristina Fernández de Kirchner was defined by the president herself as an historical opportunity to seek truth and justice for the victims. This is something we must put behind.
Ese memorándum fue cuestionado por toda la dirigencia política de la oposición en ese momento en la Argentina y fue llevado a la justicia por la DAIA y por la AMIA. Y se logró que se declarara inconstitucional, más allá de que había sido aprobado por el Congreso argentino en una lastimosa sesión un mes después de haber sido firmado con Irán, y en donde nunca Irán ratificó ese memorándum porque lo único que buscaba era la desaparición de las alertas rojas en Interpol, algo que no se consiguió.
This memorandum, this agreement, was questioned by the opposition. And even after only a month it's been signed, was declared unconstitutional by the Argentinian justice. We are clear that the only objective, the only target of this agreement was to search impunity for the perpetrators. And their only goal was to withdraw the red alerts that have been put against those responsible for the attack.
Una de las primeras medidas que tomó el presidente Macri cuando asumió su presidencia el 10 de diciembre de 2015 fue ordenar al ministro de Justicia que no apelara la decisión que declaraba la inconstitucionalidad del memorándum con Irán. Pero además de eso, instruyó al ministro de Justicia para que pusiera e hiciera todas las acciones a su cargo para lograr justicia y lograr la condena de los responsables del atentado. Y a partir de allí comenzamos a trabajar en un proyecto de juicio en ausencia.
In 2015, as soon as he took office, President Macri instructed his Minister of Justice to not appeal this sentence that declared the memorandum between Iran and Argentina unconstitutional. And he also instructed members of his cabinet to work as quickly as possible to perform what is defined as a trial in absence against everybody related and responsible for the AMIA attack to obtain their conviction.
Un año antes, el 15 de enero del 2015, el fiscal federal Alberto Nisman hacía una denuncia que conmocionaba la opinión pública en mi país y acusaba a la entonces presidenta de la Nación de traición a la patria y encubrimiento por la firma del memorándum con Irán.
On January 15, 2015, the late prosecutor Alberto Nisman shocked the public opinion of Argentina. He publicly indicted former President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner of betraying Argentina and being an accomplice in the AMIA attacks.
El día anterior al que debía presentarse al Congreso de la Nación, en donde, junto a la por entonces presidenta de la Comisión de Legislación Penal, íbamos a recibir a la denuncia de Alberto Nisman, apareció asesinado en su departamento, con una clara vinculación con la denuncia que había realizado.
The day before, Prosecutor Nisman had to be present in Congress to testify on the results of his investigation, and we were eagerly waiting for the conclusions of this report. Alberto Nisman was found murdered in his own apartment.
Hoy, el asesinato de Alberto Nisman continúa impune y se suma a las víctimas del atentado a la AMIA.
Today, Alberto Nisman's assassination is still in impunity, and we consider him another victim of the AMIA attack.
El gobierno del presidente Macri está decididamente comprometido en la lucha contra el terrorismo internacional y el financiamiento de sus actividades, y desde un comienzo tomó medidas en este sentido, no solo con la no apelación del memorándum con Irán, tampoco con la creación del registro, sino que ha tomado muchas medidas que quizás pasaron en su momento desapercibidas, pero que hoy toman verdadera dimensión y perfilan y dan testimonio de la convicción que tiene a la hora de encarar la lucha contra el terrorismo internacional.
President Macri's commitment in the fight against global terrorism is not only limited to the aforementioned not appealing instruction on the declaration of inconstitutionality of the memorandum between Argentina and Iran. It's not only limited to this registry. It comprises a number of actions that are less known but not less effective. This commitment is ongoing and it's part of President Macri's policy.
Antes de hablar de lo que supone y significa el registro de entidades y personas vinculadas al terrorismo, simplemente quiero enunciar las medidas porque me parece que son relevantes. La primera tiene que ver con la posibilidad de que se permita la figura del arrepentido en causas de terrorismo en la República Argentina. Además, que se establezcan la posibilidad de disponer de técnicas especiales de investigación en causas de terrorismo, como puede ser el agente encubierto, el agente revelador o el informante, para garantizar que, en definitiva, se pueda llegar a esclarecer los hechos delictivos a partir de valiosa información que se pueda aportar.
In order to get a better understanding, before explaining the registry, I would like to mention some of these measures that have been undertaken by the Macri administration. Among them, we have created new legal figures as the effective cooperation in cases of terrorism, the use of covert agents, the use of informants that were not previously covered in Argentinian law.
La aplicación contra organizaciones terroristas y terroristas de la extinción de dominio o el decomiso sin condena para sacarles los bienes producto de las actividades ilícitas y para que el Estado no se transforme en garante de los bienes de las organizaciones terroristas es otra de las medidas impulsadas, además de un incremento de los controles migratorios, fundamentalmente para impedir que ingresen personas con frondosos prontuarios eventualmente vinculadas con el terrorismo, algo que no estaba garantizado. Esto es, con anterioridad a la administración del presidente Macri, no habían controles fronterizos y por lo tanto ingresaban al país personas con pedidos de captura internacional o eventualmente vinculadas a delitos graves como por ejemplo el terrorismo.
Other measures include the possibility of seizing property from individuals or organizations linked with terrorist activities, more strict immigration control, which allows now the Argentinian Republic to see what kind of individuals are entering the country. If they have a criminal record, before this type of control was not possible due to the lack of a legal framework.
Y a partir de un gran trabajo de la Unidad de Información Financiera que conduce Mariano Federici, se logró el congelamiento de activos del clan Barakat en la zona de la Triple Frontera, y otra de las medidas que estamos impulsando desde el Congreso de la Nación y creemos que es imprescindible aprobar es el juicio en ausencia para que se pueda condenar a los responsables aunque evadan el accionar de la justicia, aunque no quieran someterse a la justicia argentina y no se presenten en los tribunales de mi país.
Another example of these new measures is the freezing of all the assets belonging to the Hassan Barakat clan. We also are pushing forward for the approval of legal measures to allow the trial in absence for people responsible of terrorism activities.
Yendo puntualmente al registro de organizaciones y entidades terroristas, necesitábamos quebrar muchísimos años de historia de impunidad en la República Argentina, en donde a los terroristas no se los llamaba por su nombre. Muy por el contrario, como supo decir en algún momento el embajador de Israel en la Argentina, cualquiera podía contribuir con Hezbollah en la República Argentina o cualquiera podía izar una bandera de Hezbollah en la República Argentina porque no era considerada una organización terrorista. Esto cambió a partir de la semana pasada en mi país.
Now entering into the subject of the public registry of people or entities linked to acts of terrorism and their financing, this is a historical landmark. Terrorists were not even called by their name in Argentina. If somebody liked to fly the flag of Hezbollah in Argentina, as it was mentioned by the Israeli ambassador, they were free to do so. Nowadays, that's not the case due to the legal actions taken by the Argentinian government.
Las únicas organizaciones y personas que eran consideradas terroristas en la República Argentina eran aquellas que listaba el Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas, pero no reconocía otras organizaciones o entidades o personas terroristas vinculadas a listas de otros países o eventualmente de las propias causas judiciales que la República Argentina iniciaba en el país.
So basically, the only people that could be considered terrorists in Argentina were those defined by the UN Security Council. Not even people accused of such activities in Argentina could be called terrorists.
Lo primero que empezamos a hacer es trabajar sobre un anteproyecto de mi autoría, que posteriormente se transformó en la base del decreto, y lo que hicimos fue, en primer lugar, derribar los fantasmas del pasado, porque esto no tenía que ver con el terrorismo de Estado de los 70, ni tampoco tenía que ver con la criminalización de la protesta, como algunas organizaciones de izquierda muchas veces creían que este tipo de medidas estaban orientadas.
The first thing we did was to create a project in which I was one of the authors. It was a difficult task because we have to deal with the ghost of the past, the ghost of the past of state terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism during the 70s, and also the fact that we were not criminalizing social protest at as it was also done in the past in Argentina.
Queríamos atacar a las organizaciones terroristas de carácter internacional que operaban en la República Argentina. Y por ello conformamos un gran equipo de trabajo que lo integraron en primer lugar y tuvo un papel preponderante Mariano Federici y su unidad de información financiera, que trabajó codo a codo hasta último momento para la concreción de este registro, y es quien la semana pasada congeló los activos de Hezbollah y le incorporó al registro.
We wanted to attack terrorist organizations that were active in the national and international arena. For this task, we created a team, a task force. One of the most relevant participants in this task force was Mariano Federici, who was leading the financial unit and who was paramount in obtaining the freezing of Hezbollah assets in Argentina.
Pero también trabajaron codo a codo e hicieron grandes aportes y aportaron sus equipos técnicos el embajador de mi país, Jorge Forí, el canciller. Lo hizo también la ministra de Seguridad, Patricia Bullrich, el ministro de Justicia, Germán Garabano, el ministro de Defensa, Oscar Aguad, y el asesor en política exterior, Fulvio Pompeo. Pusieron todos sus equipos a trabajar en este proyecto que no tenía precedentes históricos en el país y, como dijo recién Joseph, tampoco en la región.
Other people who worked in this project were Jorge Fori, Patricia Bullrich, Germán Garabano, a gentleman by the name of Aguad, Oscar Aguad, and Jorge Pompeo.
¿Quiénes van a integrar o quiénes están ya integrando, porque este registro ya está en vigencia en la República Argentina? Claro está que lo integran todas aquellas personas u organizaciones que lista el Consejo de Seguridad de Naciones Unidas.
This registry is already being enacted. It, of course, includes every single person defined as a terrorist by the United Nations Security Council.
También lo integran todas aquellas personas u organizaciones que estén siendo investigadas en la República Argentina por causas vinculadas al terrorismo o su financiamiento, sin importar que tengan condena. La sola investigación ya habilita la inscripción en el registro de personas o entidades terroristas.
But also every single person and organization that is being already investigated for terrorism-related activities in Argentina. Even the sole beginning of the investigation, it's cause enough for this person and organization to be included in the registry.
Y también aquellas personas y organizaciones que la Unidad de Información Financiera congele los activos, con lo cual esto abre la posibilidad de que puedan ser inscriptas en el registro de personas y organizaciones terroristas que sean solicitadas por terceros estados y que la Unidad de Información Financiera juzgue como razonable y a partir de allí congele los activos y posteriormente los inscriba en el registro.
Also, those persons and organizations that are defined as participants in funding terrorism. This allows the registry to be activated, freezing assets, and also allowing Argentina to effectively cooperate with other countries when a request for these individuals come through the legal channels.
Este registro ya entró en vigencia desde el día siguiente al de su publicación y actualmente cuenta con más de 1.000 personas y organizaciones terroristas listadas, entre ellas Hezbollah, que al día siguiente de su publicación se le congelaron los activos producto del pedido de la Unidad de Información Financiera.
This registry was enacted the very next day after it was decreed. It includes, to this day, 1,000 people, over 1,000 people and organizations connected to terrorist activities. It also includes Hezbollah, which the very next day had all its assets in Argentina frozen by the Financial Investigative Unit of the Argentinian government.
Esta medida no hubiese sido posible, y esto es necesario destacarlo y reafirmarlo, sin la decisión inquebrantable del presidente de mi país, Mauricio Macri, quien no dudó un segundo a la hora de apoyarnos e incentivarnos para que buscáramos todos los medios y mecanismos posibles para declarar a las organizaciones terroristas que operaban en el país, que operaron en el país y que cometieron los atentados de la Embajada de Israel y de la AMIA.
This measure wouldn't have been possible without the action of President Mauricio Macri, who didn't hesitate in supporting us in order to obtain the proper legal measures to fight against terrorism and to seek justice for the victims of the AMIA attack.
Como dice el presidente de mi país, la paz mundial se construye día a día, ladrillo por ladrillo, y la República Argentina, la semana pasada, asentó un ladrillo muy importante para declarar a las organizaciones terroristas en este registro.
As President Macri says, world peace is built daily, brick by brick, and by this measure, we have put another brick in order to be able to construct a better and more safe environment in the international community.
Después de los atentados, ya nada será igual. Nosotros no seremos iguales. Tenemos la obligación de ser mejores para garantizar la paz de las generaciones futuras, para que no vivan el horror, la violencia y la sangre que le tocó vivir a nuestra generación.
After the attacks, we were not the same. After terrorism, nobody can be the same. Through these legal measures, we want the future generations to be spared of the horrors, the bloodshed, and the violence that we suffered in our time.
Tenemos la obligación de responder al odio con las armas de la democracia, con el brazo de la justicia, respetando los derechos humanos, pero todos los derechos humanos, también los derechos humanos de las víctimas, que reclaman justicia y condenar a los responsables.
We have the obligation to respond to hatred with the weapons of democracy, respecting human rights, but also remembering that we must respect the human rights of the victims, not only of the perpetrators.
Los derechos humanos no pueden transformarse en una garantía de impunidad para los culpables, abandonando a su suerte a las víctimas.
Human rights cannot be a blank check of impunity. We need to remember that first and foremost, human rights are there to support and protect the victims.
Necesitamos pelear todos juntos. La cooperación es fundamental para vencer al terrorismo. No podemos estar separados o aislados frente a este flagelo común. No podemos permitir que el terrorismo avance en el mundo. Por eso tenemos que poder pensar y crear organizaciones supranacionales que tengan capacidad de investigar y perseguir a terroristas por el mundo. Debemos reconocer que no alcanzan con los sistemas de justicia locales.
We need cooperation. We need to realize that we need to work together, all of us. We need to acknowledge the necessity, the need to create supranational organizations able to fight terrorism wherever it is found.
Argentina considera a los Estados Unidos un aliado estratégico en la lucha contra el terrorismo, la narcocriminalidad y el crimen organizado y agradece todo su apoyo, fundamentalmente a partir del último pedido de recompensa a uno de los responsables del atentado.
Argentina recognizes the United States as an ally in the fight against terrorism and transnational organized crime, especially in the cooperation that was demonstrated in the latest days in the effective arrest and detention of one of the persons responsible of the attack.
Por último, mi compromiso y el compromiso de mi gobierno es para con las víctimas. No vamos a pactar con los perpetradores. No vamos a firmar el perdón de los responsables. Queremos su condena. Queremos que paguen en prisión sus delitos. No pueden permanecer impunes. La memoria de 85 personas así lo exigen.
Last but not least, we must establish one more time that our responsibility is to the victims. We will not cast any pact with the perpetrators. We want their convictions. We want them to be legally convicted, respecting their human rights, but effectively establishing justice.
25 años de impunidad nos avergüenzan, pero también nos obligan a ser duros para condenar a quienes han sido sus responsables. Argentina tiene una herida abierta hace más de 25 años. Las víctimas necesitan justicia, el pueblo necesita saber qué pasó y las instituciones necesitan estar a la altura para dar las respuestas que demandan las víctimas y la sociedad.
25 years of impunity have ashamed us. This attack is an open wound in the fabric of Argentinian society. Justice for the victims is our priority.
Platón decía, justicia lenta no es justicia. Yo agrego, no es impunidad porque llega, aunque tarde, cuando ya nadie le espera. Las víctimas de la AMIA aún esperan. Muchas gracias.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I want to thank the representative for his words. I think it's very moving to finally see the Argentinian government acting to provide justice for the victims. On the other hand, there's a very, very important concept that has been repeated here. It was established on the first panel, and it's part of the message of the representative as it was of the words of the previous speaker. This is a global threat. The ability of organizations like Hezbollah is not confined to the borders of a single nation. It affects all of us. Who is facilitating the smuggling of gold and the moving of financial resources in Venezuela? Who is actually doing gun-running operations in the Mediterranean and helping ISIS to get weapons? Who is actually facilitating the cash flow of organizations like Odebrecht, one of the most relevant schemes of global corruption in recent history? And the answer to that is Hezbollah. This alone must make all of us realize that we're dealing with a global enemy with multiple allies, part of a completely new form of warfare that integrates the capabilities of organizations like this and those of rogue states that want to attack our values, our principles, and our form of life.
Thank you. Well, very, very important presentation by Congressman Luis Petri. We thank you for coming all the way from Argentina to here to Washington. This is a privilege for us here in the United States to hear exactly how this took place in Argentina. We will be uploading his PowerPoint to our website so everybody can have access to it, that they can want to know the technical aspects of the new registry that is public in Argentina. Also, thank you to Hugo for providing the translation, but also the reflection of what this means in terms of transnational threat networks. Certainly not our final speaker in terms of what we're going to be doing moving forward, but our last speaker for today is a gentleman that really deserves a lot of credit for what's taking place. You know, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, so we put a picture up on the left from 2016 of a forum that Congressman Pittenger organized in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and by no coincidence, you see Congressman Luis Petri, Congressman Pittenger, myself, and another important congressman, Eduardo Amadeo, who sits on the Finance Committee of the Argentine National Congress, just so that you can get a sense of how long it took and the amount of work it took, led by Argentina, but supported by the United States and others. Congressman Pittenger sat on the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Terror Finance. He also chaired a congressional task force on counterterrorism and unconventional warfare. He, through that task force, started basically a global network called the Parliamentary Intelligence Security Forum, which he has now taken as a 501c3 nonprofit organization that continues to do the work of the forum. This, for example, was a forum that they organized in Buenos Aires along with the Financial Intelligence Unit, the WIF, as it's known in Argentina, and his president, Mariano Federici. And it's taken this effort to go all around the world. They just held a major conference in France. I was unfortunate I was not able to participate, but a lot of the same colleagues that obviously participated in previous forums were there. And my understanding is going to continue to do forums in around the world and in Latin America, potentially in other places such as Brazil. Maybe hopefully we can convince the congressman to come down with us to Colombia. But it's a very privilege to have you, Congressman Pittenger. I think your efforts of bringing everybody together, talking about these issues, allowed us to get to this point today. And please welcome Congressman Robert Pittenger.
Joseph, my hat's off to you, my friend. You're an extraordinarily gifted leader. You were one of the very first people who briefed me on the issues in South America. Selena as well, if she's still here, she was an extremely capable person. So you helped build the capabilities we have today. And ladies and gentlemen, I think what you just heard was truly a profile in courage. This young man is extraordinary, and I mean it truly. All over the world, I look for people with three qualities. One of them, they need to be capable. I've met a lot of capable people, but with that capability, I want somebody who's got convictions. And with that, I want somebody with courage. And my friend, you've got all three. I really appreciate Argentina wouldn't be where it is today without you and people like you. Mariano Federici, of course, your dear friend, is not here. He played a major role. But the voices, the commitment of the Josephs, the Adelinge, there's so many people who have been working and laboring in this area for many, many years. So our effort is, frankly, to bring these smart people together. I'm not one of them, but I know who they are. And to bring them together to these experts in illicit finance and cybersecurity and information sharing, all the issues that are important and relevant in our counterterrorism efforts, to provide a forum for them to build an understanding, a working collaboration with members of parliament throughout the world. So what we've seen now in Argentina is just a tribute to courage and to leadership. And may what you have done there continue. And I think that's where it brings the rest of us in. You know the Latin phrase, carpe diem. Seize the day. We need to seize this moment. There are members of Congress who, if properly understanding these issues, you have friends, whether you're staff here or your organizations are involved in these issues. We need to go to our colleagues in the House and the Senate. We need to tell them the importance of their engagement today in writing the leadership in Paraguay and Brazil and Colombia, other countries, to take the initiative. These letters have immense effect. We all are affected. I was a member of Congress for 3 terms. When somebody wrote from my district, I want to know what they had to say. But when an American congressman flies down to a country or writes a letter, it makes a difference. All the rest of our fora that we're going to have throughout the world, we're planning them when members of Congress are not in session because it's so important for them to be there. But there's some other people who have played a very quiet but a very strategic role, a number of them from the business sector. We have people who are fully aware of the role of illicit tobacco. Folks like Philip Morris, they were one of the first people who briefed me too. But they have been involved in this space for a long time. Certainly, you're aware of what happened in North Carolina this last week with arresting 31 people involved in illicit tobacco. This was initiated in 1998. It was a Hezbollah or a directed effort. But these groups make a strategic difference. Folks like SAS, a software company who has provided the technology capabilities to track money through the systems, who even today is working through their own analytics to prevent the flow of information and from data coming from the Middle East to the financial intelligence units there in Latin America. So my hat's off to those who have quietly worked to support our governments throughout the world and who have enabled all of us with their tools to be more productive and effective. I would say to you that there's some other issues that keep your eyes on. I was just in the Cologne Free Trade Zone a couple weeks ago. Free flow of goods, uninspected. I mean, they've got sensors, and the trucks are whizzing by the sensors. I said, why aren't they using the sensors? Oh, well, that doesn't matter. We don't need to do that. Well, it does matter. And the head of the Cologne Free Zone grabbed me after this meeting a couple weeks ago and said, I promise you, come back in 6 months, we'll have 6 of them. I said, I'd just like to see you to use the one you have now. So this is critical. They're playing games. We need to put pressure on Panama. We need to put pressure on that country. However we do it, American leadership needs to be there to convey to them that they cannot continue with this process. And obviously, the tri-border area is critical in this whole region. We're seeking to have now a forum in Brazil. We've had 2 in Argentina, 1 in Paraguay. We just had in January. But it's critical that this region find the commitment and the courage to do the right thing. When we were in Paraguay, it really blew up. It was on TV and front page of the newspaper for 3 days in a row because there are many issues down there. We see it's black and white. There are people who are with us, and there's people who are playing games who want the status quo. And we are going to strengthen the hand of those who are with us and support them. So thank you, Joseph. Thank you for this great effort to honor those victims, to honor Argentina, and President Macri, to honor this great gentleman. And thank you for making the effort to come up here. You're a tremendous person. God bless you.
Well, with that, very powerful remarks by Congressman Pittenger. We do end our program for today. We do not end our program at the center. We're going to be doing a lot more on this issue. This is an ongoing issue for us. We've been dealing with this and working, researching, investigating, and presenting about this going on for 8 years now. I'd like to thank all our speakers, especially Congressman Petrie for coming up from Argentina, but Congressman Duncan, Senator Cruz, John Cronin, Hugo Cha, Congressman Pittenger, my panel, and everybody that's been involved to make an effort to, I know we packed a lot in for today, but I think that it was a very productive session. I'd also like to thank all of you, the audience, especially those that have stayed the whole entire time for the 3 hours. This is not every day that we get to sit together in the Senate and to talk about this issue. There's not every day that something such as a 25th anniversary comes about. So I think this has been a very special occasion, and I thank you for being with us today. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our co-sponsors, the Middle East Forum, the American Foreign Policy Council, Fuente Latina, and the Foreign Desk, who in each and their own way are involved in this effort, have been engaged in this, whether it's through the media, policy, or activism, or any other effort that they are taking. We consider ourselves a team, and there's many other think tanks and academics and individuals involved in this that not everybody could be here or not everybody could be packed in 3 hours. So we are also thankful to them. We will hopefully include them in future programs. And lastly, and certainly not least, let me thank my team. My job is the easiest. I just get up here and speak. They put everything together, and when everything comes from the logistics to organizing the speakers, to organizing the media and everybody else that can come so that we can have a productive 3 hours. My team, our board, has been instrumental in all this, and we hope that you're proud of our efforts and continue to support our efforts moving forward. So with that, as they say in Congress, we are adjourned, and you are dismissed. So thank you for everything.
Thank you.
We'll work together.
Yes.